dreams collide. High road roaring every night. Spotlight on Spurs, feel the fight. Spotlight on Spurs, hearts ablaze through the cheers and cloudy days. From the lane to glory's flight. Spotlight on Spurs, shine so bright. Echoes rise when we take the field. This is passion, nothing concealed. Through the tackles, joy ignites. Spotlight on Spurs, burning lights. Feel the tempo, sweet and wild. London's warriors never mild. Every challenge we endure. Spotlight on Spurs, loud and pure.
Hey guys, Luke here from Spotlight on Spurs. Bit different today. We are going with a Monday stream after StreamYard decided to cancel our plans last week. We have a fantastic couple of guests joining. You will be familiar with both of them, I know for sure. One of them because he is a regular on the channel. He's here every week. Essentially, he is the co-host, Christopher Hubble. How are we doing, sir?
Hello, mate. How's things? All right?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Spurs are not in a process of losing game after game. We're European champions. What is there not to smile about, mate?
It's just scrolling through Twitter at a minute, figuring out what transfers are happening and what's going on with the club. Still interested.
Constantly tweeting back to any rival fans saying what a trophy and saying we are European champions. That's all I've been doing, mate. It's absolutely brilliant. And then making his debut on the channel, but everybody is going to know this fella. I am absolutely delighted to welcome in Euro expert Alex, my man. How are we doing? And thank you so much for coming on.
I'm doing very good, thank you. First of all, thank you for that introduction. And your introduction was very cool as well. So I always love a string on introduction like that. Is awesome. I say I'm okay. A good caveat here. I recorded for an hour with a Celtic channel before this, and about 5 houses along from mine, there is the world's loudest dog, which means I have to shut all my windows, which means to make sure no noise destroys any recording I do. Which means I am ginger and dying of the heat in London. So if I look like I'm melting away as we talk, it's not because I'm panicking about Tottenham. It's because I am literally dying. But it's all good.
If you want to open up the window, mate, we're all inclusive.
No.
Everyone's included.
You don't need that dog like barking down this microphone. Believe me, I'll save you it.
So, as I said, I really, really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, we are in the midst of the mad transfer season, which actually has just opened. Obviously, there was the short transfer that window that kind of opened for the teams that are competing in the World Club Cup, with the thousands and thousands and thousands of fans that are turning up to not watch the football, because there's about 5 people in every single stadium at this moment in time, which is absolutely crazy. But we are going to essentially do a breakdown of all things Thomas Frank. So you very kindly put in some work, and we obviously have our own opinions from I've spoken to Brentford fans. Obviously, myself and Chris basically watch every single Spurs game, so we've seen Brentford play, and obviously familiar as well. So we will like to have some sort of input, but we are definitely in the hands of the experts. So we will be led by you for sure. What we're going to do, as I said, we'll run through. We'll kind of just go into your kind of thoughts and feelings around Frank, what potentially Spurs fans can expect to see from what he does, what sort of weaknesses and strengths kind of thing, and then we'll kind of go on to some transfers as well. Hopefully there'll be some fans in the chat, and what we'll do right at the end, because I know, as I said, you've done your data as you always do. What I was thinking of doing just at the end is that there might just be some random names that people throw at us. I've got a few here as well, and we'll just kind of do a yes no and it's nothing too serious. Just at the end, we'll see how we get on. So I'm not expecting it to be a huge long one, but if you want to go into as much detail as you want, that is absolutely fine by us. So yeah, let's start then. Chris, I will start with you. What are your thoughts on the Frank appointment? Obviously, there's been a lot made of not winning anything, him never really managing in Europe, etc. What are your thoughts around the appointment?
I think he's a steady appointment. He comes with a good track record in the Premier League. As you say, he's not really done much in Europe, but hopefully we see a different style of football being played, back to something that we all want to, we enjoy watching, and it just gets everyone excited, and we keep the momentum going and hopefully push on and potentially try and win another cup next season.
Is that what you're kind of hoping for? It's just to kind of steady the ship a little bit, because obviously it was so up and down in different sides.
Yeah, I think the league form can only get better. If it gets any worse, we'll be in the Championship. So I can't see that happening. I think the league form should get better, and I think the biggest struggle is, and I think in the next 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to really prove how much he does get backed and with what players he gets and how much his input is on that. So having obviously the squad for the Champions League games as well as the Premier League and everything else comes with it. We know last season we struggled. We need a big squad. We need to have 14, 15 players ready to be on that pitch all the time. It'd be interesting to see about the injuries, because we don't get many injuries. It can't be the players. So it might be that we find out a few things about if our players are just injury prone, if there's training that's caused it, if it's a change in style. So something to enjoy, something to look forward to. It doesn't. I think when it got announced, it didn't light up. I wasn't sitting there going, "Yes, I'm so glad we got Thomas Frank," but just hoping that it's a change in direction. It's hard to get excited when I think the biggest change needs to be made at the top level, and we've seen a few people at the top being moved on.
There's been a lot of changes.
Yeah. So overall, genuinely happy. I don't think, as I say, league form can't get any worse. So looking forward to actually enjoying our league games again and just seeing how we do.
Well, if anyone from Spurs is watching, Levy, etc., Alex is going to fix all of the problems that we've got. Me and Chris are going to kind of participate, but Alex is absolutely going to fix any issue that we have. So no pressure. Alex, what was your thoughts on Thomas Frank's appointment? And also just give a little bit of a background, because there may be people out there that obviously see your videos but don't necessarily know who you support and kind of that sort of thing. So do a little bit of an introduction if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So if anyone hasn't come across me before, I work for The Athletic. I previously had an account called Euro Expert, and then I finally got bullied into changing that name after many years. I'm a neutral fan. I don't support anybody. It's a very fun existence. It's definitely not the sort of thing where you're watching Nice beat Marseille on a Friday night and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's 0-0 and I've got no stake in this game and what is my life? But it's fine, because when England play, I get behind them. We're going to win the World Cup. But for Thomas Frank, because he's a lot more interesting than me, I've got a lot of thoughts on him, both positive and negative, and I can pick up a lot of things that Chris is just talking about. So I start in the positive section because that's always a good place to start, right? Something Chris was mentioning that I think's a really valid point that I haven't seen made elsewhere actually is like the environment he's walking into. I think obviously when Ange Postecoglou left, it's like, okay, this sucks. He's won our trophy, and even though it seemed on paper that the fan base is divided over it, like I know there was a poll done where it's like 50-50 fans wanted him in or out after the Europa League win. It did kind of feel like the loud majority of fans were extremely annoyed with him going, and especially how he went as well, like so long after the end of the season, and in kind of like it seemed like an unplanned way. But I do think once that sadness dies down, and then when everyone starts thinking a bit more coldly on the topic, it's kind of what Chris is saying, like it can't get worse than relegation. And also the biggest point is you've got the thing that you've been wanting for 17 years. You've won a trophy. Every time there's those lines that come out of Tottenham having a new project and it's this new years long thing and we're going to get a trophy at the end of it. It's like, oh, whatever, because, I just want the trophy now. But you've got that trophy. So I actually think there's a bit of breathing room for Thomas Frank. If he comes in and finishes 6th or 7th, I think he'll get a bit of breathing room because it's A lot better than last season, but also B, like, it's fine if as long as he gets into Europa Conference League or something, as long as there's something to cling on to and there's a positive end to the season. It's not like it's we're the laughing stock, we've got ages to go. As you guys talked about before, you've won your trophy, you've got a bit of breathing room. So he's coming into a good environment, and he's a good man manager as well. So that I kind of back in to pick up any players who are annoyed about Ange Postecoglou thing.
Completely agree.
Yeah, so that's another positive point. There are some concerns I have. So the first one I'm going to call the Graham Potter concern. Remember when Graham Potter left Brighton for Chelsea, and everyone the line that came out, I remember from a lot of media organisations was, Bluco, Todd Bowley, wow, they were stupid for sacking Thomas Tuchel. But you know what? They've done the next smartest thing. They've hired Graham Potter. They hired the best up-and-coming England manager. It's a very harsh appointment, but they've handled it well. And I think what went under the radar at the time was, okay, Graham Potter did very well at Brighton, but when he left, what he exposed was the fact that Brighton are just an exceptionally well-run club. And I do fear that you might get the same effect with Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank gets a lot of the credit for what's happened at Brentford, and he rightly should. Someone pointed out when Brian and Boomer arrived at first, he was not putting up amazing numbers, and Thomas Frank has helped hone into a brilliant player. But it's not like, Thomas Frank took over a bunch of randoms or players who were not good. Brentford had very, very good recruitment, and they've been able to spot players who could become Premier League level. And it's, a question that I posed to a Tottenham friend was, if I had to ask you who's going to be better off next season, Spurs with relative to their position right now, Thomas Frank with Tottenham or Brentford with whoever they've identified to replace Thomas Frank, you're not really sure, because I think deep down we all know that Brentford without Thomas Frank, they'll probably be fine because they're a really smart club. So it's going to be a big test for him to see how well he does outside of that. And I guess to round off this very long monologue, I'd say the other concern as well is how I think he might shift from Postecoglou. There's a lot of talk about how Thomas Frank is adaptable, and that is really good. But I think fundamentally he believes in some form of direct football, and he's a bit more willing than Postecoglou to defending a block. And while Postecoglou got praise in the Europa League run for defending in a block, I do think that demands a lot more from your team in different ways than how he likes to defend. A good example of this is Van de Ven, right? Van de Ven is someone who is the perfect highline defender because he's the fastest man on the planet. If you're going to get Spurs to defend in a bit more of a lower or mid block and not playing such a high line like you did under Ange, then not only are you stripping Van de Ven's biggest strength away from him a lot of the time, or not making as much use of it, let's say, but it's also a question of is he going to be as good at defending in a block as, let's say, Ethan Pinnock, for example, right, who's the ultimate specialist at Thomas Frank. Now I think he will, because I really like Van de Ven, but that's the example I'm giving to think of across the team. That there's Brentford played a lot of long balls last year. I think near the most in the Premier League, where Tottenham were right near the bottom, and they also spent more time in a low block statistically than any other team in the Premier League as well. So it's quite a stylistic shift, even if Frank adapts, I suspect, and that might demand a lot of subtle things from the players, and it'd be interesting to see who wins and who loses in that battle.
Yeah, and to be honest, obviously I'm not sure if you've seen any of my stuff, but when Frank was first mentioned about it, one of my key problems was the fact that I think he's almost too adaptable for a Spurs fan base, because I'm not saying that being adaptable is a negative. However, I can very much see Thomas Frank doing something along the lines of, we're playing Wolves away and they're going with 2 up front. So what we'll do is we'll drop and change our formation to make sure we nullify them. And Spurs fans sit there and go, well, no, hang on a minute. We're Tottenham. They're Wolves. They should worry about us. So I said that, and some fans in the Spurs fan base have kind of given me a bit of jip for it, saying that it's a negative being too adaptable. But my thing is, again, it comes back to the fans. And I don't think fans are going to be too happy. Whereas Brentford, with all due respect, are happy to go if they pick up 3 points here and they pick up a draw here and it's a tough away game. It's a different sort of expectation. And I completely agree. One of my other fears, and I don't know whether it is one for you, is, and I think I might have mentioned it earlier, is the European run. So Frank has obviously only ever managed in Europe from when he was in Denmark. It's a completely different thing. Chris mentioned earlier about injuries. Now, for us, and someone brought it up, I can't remember whose stream I was on, but someone brought up that if a player's out for Brentford for 4 weeks, they miss 4 games. Whereas if they're out for 4 weeks at Spurs, they could potentially miss 8. It's a completely different shift in all of that sort of stuff. Is there any concern from you that he can't? Obviously, this is an unknown. This isn't something we can say he definitely can't handle it, but it's an unknown. Is that something that you think might be a problem for him, playing twice a week and having less time on a training pitch?
It's interesting. I think you're absolutely right. I'm surprised. That my surprise is just more because I have only thought of that in a positive light, actually. And it's not to say you're wrong there at all. I think you're right, but I do think Frank actually might do better in Europe than in the league, because it goes back to what you're saying. Like, good example I think you've given there about the Wolves example. So let's take that. Let's say Thomas Frank is playing against Wolves and he does tweak his team a bit, and you come out with like a 1-1 draw, and it's like, well, what was the point in that? Like, we've adapted and we've gone away to Wolves, we've only picked up a point. Like, okay, that's great at Brentford where you're trying to stay up and maybe reach mid-table. At Tottenham, that is just not good enough. We need to finish in the European spots. Whereas if you're in the Champions League stage and you're playing Milan, for example, and you do adapt and you go away to Milan, maybe you like win or you draw 1-1 or draw 2-2, Frank is going to come away a lot better than that. And I think that actually suits his management style. And I'd be shocked if he doesn't take Spurs into at least the playoff rounds in the Champions League. I think he could get into the round of 16. And I feel like him being able to be a bit more adaptable, take a bit more of an underdog mentality, that's more like what he's currently doing with Brentford. So that probably suits him a bit more. Whereas I think the concern I definitely have, which is what you touched on before, is in the league, it's going to be a really big shift from going to let's just pick up the points where we can and stay in the Premier League to we need to maximize the points we take. We need to demolish the smaller teams as much as we can and try and like compete in this ever competitive race for European football.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Matrix Moves, appreciate the message. I can see Vicario losing with how many touches the Brentford goalkeeper makes. Now, funnily enough, what I tried to do is reach out to, we've got loan players, so I reach out to the players the fans that watch them players week in, week out, because again, what Spurs fans do is see a load of stats and go, oh, that player should have been playing first team, etc. So the first thing I done was, when this was all looked at, was reach out to Brentford fans. And I've actually released a video on my channel of a Brentford fan coming on and giving his opinions. And actually, he's almost hot take, if you like, was he thinks that he would definitely look for a Vicario upgrade, albeit that he might not be a priority right now. However, he thinks that, he said, I haven't seen Kinski play, but if Kinski's good with his feet, he wouldn't be surprised if towards the end of the season, Kinski may overtake Vicario because of how good the football is in terms of the goalkeeper. People forget that the last 2 goalkeepers that have been there are Flecken, who has obviously just moved on to, I think it's Leverkusen, and the person before that was David Raya, who obviously went to Arsenal. So there is a bit of a hot take in there potentially that if there is the ability to upgrade, and there's obviously been quite a lot of rumours today saying that Vicario might be one to go out. So it doesn't actually surprise me, to be honest with you. And I do think that that's an upgrade that needs to be happen. Maybe that's something that Alex will bring up later on when he's going through the tactical side of things on in terms of our current squad. So in terms of, that's the thought. So do we think that, and Chris, again, I'll go to you. Do you think that, I'm not just saying as a club, I'm saying right now, just after Europa League, so taking everything into context, you have got the fact that we're in the Champions League. However, you have also got, let's just use Daniel Levy and say that we're going to go off of what he's shown previously, despite recent reports, again, over the last couple of days saying we're going to go and we're going to spend big, because that happens every summer. We are expecting that, it's going to be young players mainly that kind of come in the club. We're not going to spend big on older players. So young players coming in. He's probably going to have some sort of restrictions on the budget. Do you think Thomas Frank is a perfect fit for this current Spurs team?
I think he is. Yeah, I think he is, because I've seen reports about when we signed Archie Gray, Brentford was basically knocking on the door for Archie Gray as well. They wanted him. So
Brennan Johnson as well.
Yeah,
was one he wanted.
So I think when you look at the track record of who Frank has gone in for at Tottenham side, like there's a lot of players that we've ended up signing that they was after, and there was concrete interest there as well. So I think he likes to coach players, so the younger players will definitely benefit out of that. I think he's brought quite a few of his coaching staff with him as well, from what I can gather, and there's a few of the Spurs ones going out the door still, I think. So there'll be a few more hopeful coaches coming in as well. So I think right now with the young squad that we've got, I think he'll definitely coach and hopefully improve the players like Archie Gray. He'll bring like Mikey Moore if he does stay in the. I think if Mikey Moore doesn't go out on loan, it will show that he'll probably show some faith in some of the younger players. And we've got a lot of youngsters coming back from loan, which when we was on a few weeks ago, we went through sort of the buy, keep, sell part of it. I think a lot of them youngsters will be looking at this appointment going, I might get a chance here if I can just get in the training ground and prove to him what I can do. They might try to earn their place in the squad. I'm not saying that we're going to use our youngsters and not go and buy anyone, but it'd be nice to see a few of these hot prospects in our under 21 squad actually come to fruit and play in the first team, because some of them probably are good enough, and with the right coaching they will get to that level as well. So I think right now it probably is a good fit and it does work for Spurs.
I do agree with you, and also, and I've literally just thought about this while you're talking. I mean, Spurs have always, I think Alex kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Spurs have kind of, if we go and play a second string team, say in the Carling Cup, and we go out to a relatively easy team. I think Fulham was one that we went out on a FA Cup. We went out to Fulham, and it was a reduced team. It was, I think there was 7 or 8 changes, something like that. And Postecoglou got absolutely ruined for that because we were so desperate to win something. It's like you can't throw away that opportunity. Whereas now maybe the Carling Cup becomes we had the Europa League. Maybe the Carling Cup now becomes not a throwaway because that's disrespectful, but we will be less on Frank if he goes and plays younger players and potentially goes out to someone we shouldn't, because we're now in the Champions League and the bigger players need to play in that. So maybe that is something that can be considered, because we're not just, as Alex said, just so desperate to try and just win anything, whatever it is. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on in terms of it being a good fit? And as I say, we're talking about not just in terms of the playing squad, but the culture and what Spurs are currently looking at as a club.
Yeah, I think it ticks all the nearly all of the boxes. So cultural fit, I think you're right. Like, as we spoke about before, he's coming in to maybe what seems like a tricky environment actually at the right time, and he's probably the right fit for it. He should be in like a nice face around the ground, and like as we've spoken about as well, as Chris spoke about, like good with working with young players, and Tottenham have a very young squad. So, and also I think on the playing side too, you know, there is a lot of debate about what Frank exactly will do, but I do think there was a nice like potential fit. So I think Frank, for example, I think it's quite clear he's going to play inside forwards because he likes to have his wingers be goal scorers. And you've got Matisse Tell, who that is probably the only role I back him to reach the top level. I'm not sure he was going to work out as a winger or a striker. So playing him as like an inside forward, I think that's quite nice. Same with Brennan Johnson as well. The man who only scores goals and does nothing else. That should probably suit him too, that inside forward role. The only area I'm like, it goes back to what I was talking about before. It's like the stylistic shift where I looked at the numbers beforehand. I think Brentford won around 51 or 52% of their ground and aerial duels last season, whereas Tottenham were around 47, 46%. And Brentford obviously play quite direct, but I do think that speaks to the fact that Brentford, they're an older side too under Frank, and you know they're more capable of winning duels. And I think that is important because you know Postecoglou faced a lot of counter-attacks at Tottenham, but that generally came from pressing extremely high and playing in an extremely fast way. But I think those counter-attacks were more pressure on the defense to like race back and defending like counter-attacks on the ground, let's say. Whereas I think with Frank, his teams tend to be a bit more transitional. He tends to try and create like situations where his team can go and play direct and win their duels, and in the same way defend like direct balls. So winning duels, I think, is going to be a big importance to him. So again, coming back to that point of winners and losers, like in terms of a good fit for Spurs and the squad, I think this is the question mark I have is what do you do with players like Bergvall, for example, who is still very young, can still be shifted around by like physically dominant players in the Premier League. That does he suddenly not play as many minutes because he's not like yet ready to play like all the time under Frank? If Tottenham are going to play a direct style, let's say, and that might be the case for other youngsters too. Like I said, I think Brentford had an older squad, and the one youngster that Frank always picked up was Yama, and he rarely got starts at Brentford last season, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it took quite a while, at least, for him to get properly into the team. So what Frank clearly does like working with youngsters, I think those youngsters tend to be like early 20s, or like 23, 24 years old. I'm not sure what his attitude is going to be to like the group of like 19, 20-year-olds Tottenham have on their books.
That's exactly my concerns. And I was, again, it was a concern that I said that because obviously Brentford have a very unique way of developing youngsters in terms of their academy. They don't have an academy. And it was exactly what I said on another podcast, that was one of my concerns. And it was no, but Denmark, he's worked at youth level for Denmark, and I'm like, and he's also brought for loads of youth at Brentford, and I'm like, yeah, 20, 21, 22-year-olds. Mikey Moore's 17, and the way that you push through a 17-year-old is completely different to how you do a 20, 22-year-old. Do you know what I mean? So that is actually one of my concerns. I do agree. I think that he will, from a coaching aspect, I've never had concerns. From a personality aspect, I've never had concerns. However, when you want to get your young players to a certain standard in terms of the 17, 18-year-old, there's a different way of managing them. So that has been one of my concerns.
Especially, I was going to say as well, like, especially since Ange like relied so heavily on these youngsters, like he blooded them so much, right? So how are Tottenham fans going to react if they're saying Mikey Moore doesn't go out on loan? Like, may I say as well, I've not been to many games live, but Mikey Moore's the most talented player I've ever seen live play football. Like, you can probably guess the game I watched him play in. But
to be fair, there has been quite a few of them where he's just looked levels above, which is ridiculous.
It was the one where Madison called him Neymar against AZ Alkmaar. The start of that second half was unbelievable watching. Went with some friends watching the South Stand. But my point is, right, Mikey Moore, phenomenally talented player. Let's say he doesn't go out on loan. How do Spurs fans react if Frank gives him less minutes than Postecoglou did, despite him being a year older, right? It's like, what's going on here? But you're right, Frank might have a very different approach.
So again, I'm not sure, but I was very much Postecoglou in, and I wanted, that was how my journey into YouTube was very much, I had a different opinion to a lot of the fan base, and that was kind of where people were getting me on their pods, and they were saying, look, you've got a different opinion, can you come on? And I always said that I think we should stick with him, and I could completely understand where the others were coming from in terms of league form and etc. But one thing that is continually stabbed at him is he's underused Mikey Moore, and I'm like, Mikey Moore has played 20 games as a 17-year-old in the Premier League, or in all competitions, whatever that may be. Not many 17-year-olds do that. And if you're going to compare him to Yamal, football is not something you should be talking about, because Yamal is just generational. It's just so. Yeah, in terms of it's just ridiculous. He's the fact he's 17 is just crazy. But I can very much see a world where if Ange was still here, Mikey Moore probably would have played less minutes, and I think that a lot of people would have got on his back. However, Mikey Moore has come out, and there's quite a lot of people that are close within Spurs, and Mikey Moore's actually stated that he's very, very happy with the amount of minutes that he's played and the amount of games. He didn't think he'd play that much. But it will be interesting, as you've just said, next year, if he plays less, whether people are, because these people were Ange out from well before that he went, it'd be very interesting to see whether them same people are saying the same thing, given that Mikey Moore is that year older. Now, hopefully, he doesn't have the serious injury, which it looked like he potentially picked up recently for the England under 19s, I think it was. He looked like he went off with a serious ankle injury, he was crying and everything else. I'm hoping that isn't anything big and that he can start the season fit. But that will be very, very interesting to see whether or not he will feature that much next year. So what I was going to do, and obviously this is a world that I'm hoping doesn't exist, but I'm going to bring up now Frank's current 11. Now, I know that Alex, you've said previously, you've kind of looked at Frank's systems and the way that he's played and probably the profile of player that he's got. So if he was picking an 11 now and didn't get to make a sign-in for whatever reason, what sort of an 11 do you think that he would go for? Is there anyone other than the kind of, you mentioned Bergvall potentially not being in it? Is there anyone that you kind of think would be like, oh my God, he's not going to play?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the players will be the same. One area like I'm happy to be corrected on, because I do seem to be completely out of the loop, is Vicario. As far as I knew, Vicario was pretty good on the ball from what I'd seen, like especially the season before last. But it seems like a lot of Spurs fans do not think that, and like you guys talked about earlier,
if he's one of them players that if he's not pressured, he is pretty decent. If you allow him to just have the ball, then he's okay, and he definitely made some big strides improvement wise. However, when he came back from his injury, he gave the ball away for pretty poor games for about 2 or 3 games, and then it really knocked his confidence. And then everyone went, right, you remember it was the same thing with the set pieces. He kind of dropped a couple, and then everyone went, right, let's pressure him, let's stand on him, and then he looked really, really shaky. And I think that's the sort of situation. He's not a goalkeeper that's used to playing with his feet. He's come up from the lower divisions. And even at the team that we signed him for, it wasn't something he'd done. So he's come out in interviews and said that it's a new feeling for him. It's not something he's used to, but he'll embrace it. So I wouldn't say he's good. I'd say he's okay, and you can sometimes get away with it. But if you get a fully fledged press, he's not a goalkeeper that you'd want to be to be in goal. That's a personal opinion, Chris. I don't know whether you agree with that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I reckon he's not the most comfortable. He can tend to be a bit shaky, but again, it's either, I imagine Thomas Frank will say, "This is how I want to play." It's either you adapt and you train and you improve, or we'll be looking to get someone in that can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying, I think that might be less of an issue for Frank, right? Because he's more likely, I think, to go into long balls, and I think he'll make Tottenham a bit more flexible in that way. Whereas under Ange Postecoglou, it was more, let's try and build out from the back. So I think going long wouldn't necessarily be the biggest issue, but like I hear these concerns. I will say as well, I'm used to watching Gianluigi Donnarumma, who has trolled me really, because he's been a terrible goalkeeper for the best part of 2 years, and then won the Champions League in genuinely brilliant fashion. I can't take that away from him. So I'm used to him like looking like a schoolboy under pressure. So that's the standard I'm bearing Vicario with. In terms of like left back and the 2 centre backs, I wouldn't pick anybody like you wouldn't expect, like Udogie, Van der Ven, Romero. I wonder if Spence gets in over Porro just for physicality reasons. But at the same time, Porro's kind of, I never expected Porro to do well under Ange, but because he's like very much a right wing back player, and then he ended up doing quite well. But I could potentially see Spence coming in there just for physicality purposes. Midfield, as we mentioned, I will go slowly because I know you're typing them in.
That's right.
Midfield, I think number 6 is definitely a position you guys know you need to add someone in. It depends who you play them with. I was talking to my friend John McKenzie earlier. He is cooking up a Tottenham sensible transfers at the moment. And he's the point he's made, which I definitely agree with, is a lot of your deeper midfielders are carry guys. Like you think of Basuma and Papsar, they progress forward by carrying the ball forward. So you probably want a passer next to them. So I think it'd be someone and Sarr, but for the purposes of you can't make a signing yet. Oh, goodness me.
So would you say that, and obviously this is all caveated, and this is hopefully going to be the case at all, would you say Sarr has the advantage over a Bergvall in a Frank sort of system then?
Yeah, I think he's just a bit further ahead in his development. And that's not to say Bergvall can take his place, but I just think Sarr is more ready to start in the Premier League, and that's probably why he play. I mean, his partner, it barely matters. I just think you need to upgrade. We'll say Bentancur for now because I trust him a little more than Basuma, but it's not a glowing choice, I'll be honest, between those two.
I mean, towards the end of the season, Bentancur definitely looked more comfortable with someone in and around him. So you mentioned the 6, and obviously that's kind of been a massive Spurs talk for the last probably 2 years. Everybody's known that we've needed a 6. I'm in a way less concerned. We used to Spurs say monster 6, but I'm a little bit less concerned with that because he will have someone closer to him. So if Bentancur's the one that gets shifted and someone comes in, we don't need an absolute elite level 6 because he's not going to be in there on his own. He's going to be with somebody else. In my opinion, I think this is the system that Frank potentially looked to play. And therefore, as I say, he's not going to be isolated, which was one of the big concerns under Ange.
Got you. The rest of the team, I think, almost writes itself. It'd be, then again, I'm missing Kulusevski here. So I think you probably...
Kulu is out until the summer. Until December with his knee injury. Excellent. So him and Maddison potentially could be as well, depending on. But let's just say Kulu's out. But do you think Kulu's going to fit into the system? Because as Chris mentioned earlier, we done on this channel a sell, a keep, and a loan. And one of the players that we actually, as a whole, obviously because of numbers and everything else, we basically just said if you've got what we perceive as a reasonable offer, so around the 40 to 60 million pound mark for Kulusevski, would you sell him? And a lot of people actually said yes, on the basis that they don't think that he would fit Frank's system, and we could then utilize that money elsewhere. So what are your thoughts on Kulusevski?
So I wouldn't go as far to say he doesn't fit the system, because I do think he could play the Mbeumo role, right? If you surround him with runners. I think as well, he could probably fill in at 10 too, like dropping in across the pitch and picking up the ball. So I do think he fits in, but I also understand that sentiment. I think it's the best way to summarize it, right? Is like happy to keep, but fine to sell because of the value you'd probably bring in. As well, I think it also depends on how Brennan Johnson plays in this team, because I feel like he should do well, but he is still sort of a weird player who you don't always understand what he adds other than arrive at the back post and goal scoring. But for now, we'll say Johnson, and then if Maddison's out, probably a Kulusevski in the 10, Tell left wing, and then Solanke up front is how I'd set without any signings.
So even from the very start here, then do you think that Son would struggle in this team, or do you just think that it's just not got the legs, or what do you think? That I completely agree. By the way, I actually said, funnily enough, again yesterday on stream, on somebody else's stream, they were saying about Tell, and I said that the formation change and a tactic change is exactly what Tell needs, because Tell is not a number 9 and he's also not a left winger. So I think he's an inside forward, and that is the exact position that he should have Udogie on the outside of him to give the width, and therefore he's essentially closer to the goal, and then therefore that's where he'll become more impactful. So in terms of Son not being in this team, then Maddison or Kulu, we could put whatever one you like, kind of thing. But do you see Son having a future with Frank? Do you think he's just more of a bench player? What are your reasonings behind Tell being in there, or do you just think Tell's a better player at this moment in time?
I'm not sure a better player at this moment in time, but it's the physicality thing. Maybe I have been swayed by watching Son play in a role that he's entirely comfortable with under Ange Postecoglou. But over the last season, every time I've seen him try and take Son on 1v1, he just looks like a player who's not like of the level he used to be. It's quite sad, and I think he's someone to use sparingly, and this summer or next summer you look to move on. And I think this is interesting, right? Because I imagine this is something that not a lot of Spurs fans would feel comfortable saying, because he is your hero. But for me, looking at the outside, I've just not been that impressed with him this season, and I'd be like, if a good offer came in for him, I'd probably take it.
Actually not. Your player profile in Johnson is perfect, and is what most Spurs fans will say in terms of he is a back post a lethal finisher, and that is absolutely incredible. Outside of that, it's really, really struggling to see what sort of a player he is. And with Son, believe it or not, I would probably say the majority of the fan base are in a position where they go, do you know what, maybe it's just time. Maybe it just fits everybody. Yeah. If he hadn't have won a trophy last year, maybe people wouldn't be saying that. But I think it's almost like that's the pinnacle essentially, and it's only going to drop. it's only going to drop down from there. So I think most of the Spurs fan base would probably agree with you that Son is very much, if we woke up tomorrow and he was sold, it wouldn't be like a, oh my God, we've sold Son. It would be kind of like, yeah, I can kind of probably see that.
Yeah.
So you've got the player profile on that perfectly. And then up front, before you revolutionise our squad with your transfer targets, would it be Solanke, I take it, or Richarlison?
Oh, Solanke, yeah, absolutely Solanke. I quite like Richarlison, but I mean, he's just not. He's got 2 pages of injury history and transfer marks. So
honestly, and do you know what's actually scary? I didn't realise this, but I was watching a podcast recently of an Everton fan, and he actually said if you look at his injury record at Everton, he was pretty much available most of the time. And then he comes to Spurs and he just has injury upon injury.
Yeah.
So it is pretty shocking. Right. What we're going to do, we're going to save this for later. We're then going to carry on with the rest of it. We're going to talk transfers and everything else. And then we're going to come back to a new page where we're basically going to build the 11 that Frank's going to start the season and win the league with. And Alex has already confirmed that that's the case. We just need to sign all the players he says, and then we will win the league. Mr. Durag Diaries is in the building. How we doing, Jules? Big up, guys. Smash that likes. 100% smash the likes, guys. If you can't like when Alex Euro Expert, I'm not allowed to call you that anymore because you changed the name. If you can't like the stream when Alex is on, then when can you like the stream? So, guys, what we're going to do now then, and as I said, I'll come to you first on this, Chris. What sort of formation? We've kind of picked the 4-2-3-1 here, but obviously Frank is quite, I don't know again whether it's just in the fan base and the negative side, he's quite well renowned for being quite flexible, and the kind of 3 at the back, 5 at the back system was obviously synonymous with Brentford for a period of time. What sort of formation do you think we'll see from Frank coming over to Spurs?
The 4-2-3-1 definitely seems like his go-to, doesn't it? That seems to be the one that he will start the majority of the games with. As you mentioned, if we are going to be going away in the Champions League to a big team, it might be that we go to a back 5. But I think the majority of the time we will see the 4-2-3-1. I think sometimes I've seen him play like I don't know if it was a 4-3-1-2. But I can't see him using 2 strikers with the Tottenham, with the players that we've got. Well, I don't think we could. I think Richarlison and Solanke, I don't think you'd get much out of playing them 2 together. So I think the 4-2-3-1 will be our formation for the majority of the season, with tweaks depending on who we play away games, mainly in Europe and probably in the Premier League as well.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I hadn't exactly what Alex said in terms of. I never thought of his version of it in terms of him being the adaptable one to go away in a tough game away from home in the Champions League, whereas he didn't think of it as a Wolves away. So both of us have kind of seen the other side there, which is great. And then Alex, over to you. So what formation do you think he will go ahead with? Are you in agreement there with what Chris is saying?
Yeah, I think 4-2-3-1 is the way. I mean, it's worth saying that like that does shift. He's used like a centre back as a fullback, right? So it could shift back 3-wise. He also used a 4-2-4 quite often earlier in the season. So there, I think it's 4-2-3-1 base, but you have players in there who help you shift into different systems when needed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's when I spoke to the Brentford fan, he very much said that this was almost the tried formation, and then there was variances from it, but it was 4-2-3-1, and that the whole 5 at the back was very much a away from home top 6 sort of tactic that they may go into. But it was almost like I feel like whenever I hear people speak of Brentford, it was 5 at the back all the time. But actually, again, that's why I like to speak to fans of the club where he was like, no, not really. That wasn't really the case this season. So okay. So at least we've got, and what a lot of people have actually been saying, it's basically the formation that we played the Europa League in, the Europa League final, and a couple of games before that when we played away at Frankfurt. It was very much Basuma, Bentancur. They're in there together with the attacking 4. So it actually should be, although, as I'm sure we'll kind of go into in a minute, tactically will be very different in terms of the actual setup. We should be in a very similar spot. Now, saying that, perfectly to kind of move on to the next one, tactical analysis. Obviously, Chris, Ange was labelled very much as having inverted fullbacks, which I think died off slightly towards the end, but it was very much criticism of him. Obviously, he very much had three sort of midfield players in central midfield together, almost all just kind of playing wherever they like. So you'd see Maddison the deepest, then he'd be as close to the goal, and vice versa. Obviously, what sort of things do you think that you'll see from Frank that will be completely away from that Ange Postecoglou system?
I think the players will need to adapt to maybe coming away from that, because for the last 2 years, I'd say towards the end of the season, probably the last 4 months of the season, we seemed to change the way that he played, and he sort of did adapt slightly. But I think the players will need to. I mean, the inverted fullbacks, I didn't think ever was a good idea. I don't think it ever was great for us. So I think towards the end, the way we played towards the end will probably be the way that we'll start the season, with the sort of solid back, the wing backs, fullbacks, playing down the line, getting the balls in, playing that more, as you say, trying to get the balls in for Solanke, and then the link up in the middle to try and work it down the lines. I can't see there being much change from that. Just thinking about what you were talking about before, I can't see, so our centre backs, I can't see them playing right back or left back. I couldn't see Danso going to right back, Dragusin right back or left back. I couldn't see it. Probably the same with our midfielders as well.
Van der Ven, I think Van der Ven's the only centre back that we have. Maybe Ben Davies, but I don't think that with his age you'd be putting him as a fullback. But I think Van der Ven could probably play as a left back. But no, I completely agree. I don't think we've got centre backs that play fullback. And
then you look at our midfielders. I don't think Maddison has got enough to play wide, play like a left or right side. Kulichevsky could probably go right, left, or centre. I think Brennan Johnson and Tell might. I think if you put Brennan Johnson on the left-hand side. So I'm just struggling to figure if we do change tactic maybe during a game because it's not working, or we're 1-0 down and he wants to change up a bit. I think there would need to be a big. You'd probably see 3 subs being made to change the formation rather than trying to change it on the pitch. Unless we go again, if you went 2 up front, you wouldn't put Tell or Johnson up front and then push Maddison, Bergvall out to the right-hand side to cover that. So I don't think you'd even push Maddison or Bergvall up front either. So that for me would be the only sort of tactical thing that I would, if we do end up adapting during the game and he does change up because it's not going well or we're being outplayed by the opposition, I think he would need to probably, even if it was at half time, maybe make 2 or 3 changes to completely change the structure.
Yeah. And that's what he seems to be good at. That's what he's done throughout his career, is being able to make them adjustments. Alex, what is your tactical analysis of what Chris seems to be saying? Is very much it's going to be a very similar system to how he ended the season, almost the Europa League run. However, there might be obviously some changes that Frank will make. I think the way we didn't really play out from the back as much. I think it was probably he's come into a slightly more adapted version of Ange than what he would have done if he came in, say, last year.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of Chris says. I haven't got too much to add. I think the main thing I want to echo is the ability to flip between different systems. This is like something that I think Brentford are great for, like being able to go one game like a low block counter-attacking and another being able to bait the press and like play out from the back. And I think that is going to be the biggest change for Tottenham, because I know you guys said like you finished the Europa League campaign being a bit more adaptable, but I would say like there was good improvement. But even in the Europa League final, like I think a better team than Manchester United would have created a lot more chances, and Manchester United were just horrendous. Cannot echo that enough. So I think what's going to be maybe a bit of a shock to the players is after Ange Postecoglou's my way or the highway for quite often, not saying he didn't have a plan B, but he very clearly had a philosophy that he wanted to stick to. Frank is probably going to want his team to learn a few different ways of playing, and what Chris was saying, being able to change to different strategies within games. And that like one of the points as well is like one sub completely changing the formation. Like potentially bringing on a centre back to play at left back and going more of a back three and like a winger dropping into play as a wing back, for example, right? So it is having to get used to that adaptability and that flexibility. And like you said, like there is a chance of over adapting here against certain teams, but I do think like this is going to be something Frank wants. I think it suits Tottenham as well, because you want to be able to dominate weaker teams, but against the likes of like Arsenal, for example, or Man City, you want to have that different approach in your locker.
Oh yeah, 100%. And actually, within the fan base, quite a lot of fans think that we are probably better suited to a Frank system of 5 at the back, because we have Dragusin, who is not a ball playing centre back at all. So the kind of outlook that people have is that Dragusin would definitely be a central centre back in a back three. Van der Ven has definitely the legs to be able to be a left centre back, to be able to get out wide if the fullback's too far up the pitch. Udogie and Porro are better wing backs than they are fullbacks, probably, for both of them. So a lot, and also, despite the fact Spurs have about 550 wingers, we don't have any that you kind of go, they're actually star players. They're like, they need to be in the team. So actually, you could potentially lose wingers, become more like 10s, and therefore you've got the wing backs providing the width sort of thing. So I don't think a lot of Spurs fans are actually against the 5 at the back. I think that the flexibility in terms of being able to swap between a few systems is going to work out well. My concern, as I said, I think it's just if he just goes a bit too crazy with it, and almost like a Pep Guardiola, where every single new team has to have a brand new sort of formation and this, that, and the other. But we shall see. There's been quite a few questions that have come up in regards to players. So what we're going to do is towards the end, we are going to go over we've all got our own sort of players that we're going to discuss. And then at the very end, any sort of players that people want to put in the chat, we are going to basically just do a yes, no. And all three of us are kind of going to give our opinions very quickly on every single link. So I'm going to save the comments for that, and we'll discuss that a bit later on. Spurs don't have a proper 6. I know it's Frank using one of the midfielders, a double pivot for defensive purpose. Spurs priority number should be a DM. Raja, exactly what Alex has already suggested, and I think pretty much everyone in the Spurs fan base completely agree. And Connor's followed that up by saying Palhinha. I think a lot of Spurs fans are definitely in agreement that Palhinha should be someone we should be focusing on, because he's a bit of a monster in that midfield. He's a bit of experience, which we need. He seems to be a bit of a leader. He's been there, he's done it. So I think that he would be the perfect one. And when we're talking about potentially going to splash money on Semenyo's, Eze's, etc., Palhinha is a cheaper option of 30 million, so he's not going to break the bank. So I agree. Will Spurs spend 30 million on a 30-year-old? Now, that is the massive question that all Spurs fans are asking. So moving on. So we're saying that we believe he's probably going to go down a 4-2-3-1 route, and he's probably going to carry on the similar philosophies to what he's kind of settled in at Brentford. Now, I know you said about starting with the strengths before. Now, what I'm going to do is just start with some weaknesses in those tactics. So for me personally, I've seen a lot of Brentford fans say that when they're in a low block, when teams are in a low block, Brentford really, really struggle to be able to break down that low block. Now, to be honest, you could probably go to every single manager and you can go to every single club, and when teams are in a low block, they're hard to beat. That's the whole reason they go into low blocks. That is a concern for me. But maybe when you've got your Kulusevskis, your Madisons, and Tel being an inside forward, maybe the higher quality of player then makes it easier to break down with the tactics that Frank has. But Chris, what is your thought? Where do you see there being some weaknesses in his game? And I don't just mean from a tactical point of view. I mean, is there weaknesses that you think, or the Spurs fans are not going to have that, for instance? Then is he going to sit back too much and Spurs fans won't have it because we are traditionally a club that like to play attacking football? Where do you see weaknesses within his tactics? Don't slaughter him, though, because I don't want people to think I want him out or anything like that.
I think you're right. If we start playing too defensive, people are going to get sick of that quickly. I think, like with Conte, I think that was, for me, thinking back to when he started the second season, I think when he joined and he went sort of a 3 at the back, and it was quite clear that we couldn't defend. We didn't have the defenders defend at the time, and we just tried to focus on defending. It wasn't good for anyone. But for me, I think I've said it before. It's just if we need to change during the game, I don't think the players have got the range of swapping positions quite quickly. It will need to be the substitutes that will need to then be made to then adjust to that. And I think that will make it quite obvious that we are adjusting and we are changing our tactics.
But do you think that that's because you're so used to Ange being very insistent on the way that he plays? So,
No,
for instance, if we was to name Brentford's like front three, let's say, so you've got Wissa, you've got Mbeumo, you've got Sharda, and you've got there's the Danish fellow that's just gone out of my head, Damsgaard. They're not players that I would say, oh yeah, they'll be able to play in loads of different positions. But is it just a case of we haven't seen it, so therefore can they? Is Brennan Johnson able to play on? Well, we was arguing whether he could play, but right wing, left wing, could he play through the middle? Solanke's probably an isolated front man, I would agree. Tell's obviously played as a 9. Now, obviously, with a bit more coaching, a bit more understanding, is there the adaptability in the squad, or are we just so used to not seeing it that we don't know, basically?
And maybe Frank can look at the players because he would have looked at them already. He knows what players are there. He might already have an idea of adjusting players' roles and players' positions so that they can play here. And also, if we do change to this, you're going to move into this position. And it might be really good, it might be really bad. But I think just looking at it, I think if we had to change from like the sort of 4-2-3-1 into a 4-2-4 or a 5 at the back, I can't see where that change would be unless we make subs. And I think that when you make the subs, it then becomes very obvious that you're making the changes and you're changing the shape. And then if the other teams done their homework, they might then go, they're doing this, therefore we know that we're going to do to counter that as well. Yeah. And then it sort of counteracts what you've just done. So that's my only real concern is that you don't want to have 11 John O'Shea's who can play every position on the pitch, and you just keep 1 minute. You see Archie Gray at centre mid, centre back, right back, left back. You don't want that. You want the players to be playing in the same positions, but with the understanding that depending on how the game goes, and if we do go 1-0 down and there's 20 minutes left and we just need to get something, it's a case of let's just make these changes. Whereas I feel like it will just be we need to make 2, 3, 4 substitutes at one time to then create that change.
Fair enough. So in terms of main weaknesses for the tactics we presume he will go ahead with, Alex, what weaknesses do you see within them tactics?
I can focus on the low blocks thing. I think there's 2 ways you can approach low blocks, right? Generally in the Premier League. There's not only 2, but I think generally speaking, there's 2 ways we're seeing at the moment. There's the Pep Maresca way and Arteta way, which is dominating territory and just basically saying, okay, you can low block, but we're going to take advantage of that, keep the ball in your half. We're going to keep peppering your box or like keep probing your block for 90 minutes. Sure, you might skip a few times, but the idea being you're not going to be able to stay this solid for 90 minutes and not give away a clear chance. So that's one way. The other way is what we've seen Klopp and Arne Slot do, which is we're not going to let you get into your low block. We're going to play direct football and we're going to try and play quite fast. And sure, we might lose the ball. We might risk turnovers, but we're going to be good enough to contain those counter-attacks. And we're going to be good enough going direct that, yes, you'll get into your low block quite often, but we'll be able to catch you out before you get into it. I suspect Frank is going to go for that first one, just based off what he's done at Brentford. Where I've seen so many managers fall down is that approach against low blocks when you're not able to, let's say you're 1-0 down and the team has no interest in pressing you or getting out of their own half. That is the question, I think. Yeah, Brentford fans have raised it, and I think you're right to say like every manager struggles with low blocks, especially when you haven't got the elite talent to break them down. I think that is basically the huge question mark for Thomas Frank. What is his approach going to be against low blocks? Like, I've seen this kill Frank Lampard, for example, at Chelsea, as a good one. I see it definitely kill other managers as well. And the answer is we don't know how well Frank will do against these teams.
So that is, again, that's probably the key element. And to flip it the other way, Nottingham Forest being the prime example of what you're saying there, getting one up and then just having no interest in going forward. The percentage that they scored first in games this year was absolutely ridiculous. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, other than your sort of Chelsea's under Mourinho, I wouldn't be surprised if that was up there with sort of the highest, the amount of times where they took the lead. And then that's why they picked up so many victories, because they just went, we've got no interest. We do not need to come out of this low block. So, and then obviously flipping it, because I want to end the sort of tactical side with being a bit more smiley. What are the main areas of strengths that you believe that the tactics will bring, Chris? And you can use it to go from what Ange gave us to being like, so for instance, being so gung-ho, he's going to bring in defensive solidity, that sort of stuff. You can flip this however you want, but what sort of strength, what are you almost looking forward to from seeing his point of views?
I think it will give us the balance of defensively being solid, especially if we can bring in one sort of holding midfielder that is going to just do that job really well. It then gives us the balance that when we are going forward, we've got the understanding that the players that want to go forward can, because there's then the stability at the back. Also, I think it will give the players a bit more creative freedom to link up more, to try a new thing, to be more expressive, and just play the attacking football, hopefully, and bring that excitement back. Yeah,
there was definitely, although Ange was very famous for his Ange ball tactics, there were certain, especially towards the end, there was a lot of games where it was very, very difficult to watch. Alex, what sort of strengths would you be hoping for, or do you think we'll see from Frank?
I'm trying to think of a different answer to flexibility, which is the classic answer, right? I think one answer would be maybe this suits the way the Premier League is going. If you look at the data, like we've published at work, the Athletic have published, the Premier League is the most transitional league in Europe now, which is has the most counter-attacks per 90, basically. And maybe this is something that the likes of Arteta and Maresca have struggled with, which is it's hard, going back to the example I gave before, it's getting harder to pin teams in. It's getting harder to contain those counter-attacks. In fact, Guardiola is a great example. It's look how Manchester City floundered at the beginning of last season, because it felt like every time they conceded a shot, it was a goal. Mm-hmm. Maybe Frank leaning into this in a way Arne Slot kind of has as a bit. Like, that's going to be a nice advantage of it just suiting the league. And it might feel like a general answer, but that does go some way. Like, we've seen teams, rise and die due to the state of the league. Nottingham Forest, you mentioned, is a great example. I think that them low blocking teams has come at the right time. I think Union Berlin in Germany as well. In the Bundesliga, teams were consistently looking to press high and score goals through counterattacks. Union Berlin came along, were just basically a Burnley on steroids, and they just caught everyone off guard for years, and it's ages for the Bundesliga to really pin them down. And on the flip side, I look at Southampton. Southampton were a team that wanted to play out of the back and try and build through the middle, and that came at a time where a lot of teams pressed in a 4-2-4 shape, which was designed to block out the middle. So every week they would come up against teams who are basically designed to stop them doing what they wanted to do. So the state of the league really does matter. And I think maybe Frank's tactics do work in its favour.
Do you also think that the amount of quality players that are being so lower down the table makes the fact it's so much more difficult to be able to push these teams in? Like I've been saying for ages that I think we could potentially see a record high spend in the Premier League, and not because money's becoming more and more, but because Wolves have just sold £100 million worth of players. Wolves have just sold I know Man United are not what they were, but Wolves have just sold a player to Manchester United. Bournemouth have sold one to Real Madrid. They're potentially selling another one to PSG. So we're seeing the teams lower down get such good players that even if it's just one or two on a break, that's why they're becoming so hard to pen in, because normally it would be a half decent player. And if you go man for man, but with these players, is that where you think it's going? Because the teams lower down are getting such good players.
Yeah, it's becoming a much more competitive league. And again, that goes with it as well. You get teams playing bolder approaches. Like Wolves are a team that like to send a lot of players forward under Vitor Pereira. So, it does feel like there are fewer Nottingham Forests around and more teams having more ambitious play styles. And that can only be good for managers like Frank, because it potentially means you're facing fewer low blocks in the coming years.
Yeah. Just going back to the chat, Roger, does anyone think Brennan will play as a left winger, Tel play as a centre striker, and Kulu will be at right wing? No, and the only reason why I think that's a no for me on Brennan is that we have so many left wingers. If anything, we need more right wingers. So therefore, it wouldn't make sense for me to Brennan to then go over to the left-hand side. So I would probably say at this moment in time, Brennan and Kulu are probably the only right wingers. Odebear's better on the left. Son's better on the left. Moore's better on the left. Tel can play on the left. So I don't see why we would move away from that. There have been people that have suggested Brennan would be impactful off the left because he's a right footer coming inside. But that may be something that appears a couple of years down the line once we sorted out the kind of squad planning. And then Euro Expert is a Twitter legend. What a guest. I completely agree with you, AB. Absolute great having Alex on the show. And now we are going into the areas that most of you would associate coming with Alex in terms of transfer targets. So in terms of, again, I'll start with Chris. We've just obviously put together this. Let me go to the right one. We've just put this together. Now, obviously, we spoke about Ange tactics and everything else. So we're going to come away from that. This is now Frank's 11. What positions do you think are absolutely screaming out to be improved? Obviously, Tel's just been made permanent, and the assumption is that Frank has been involved in that and agreed to that as well. What sort of areas do you think will require a strengthening going into the summer window? And then hopefully that will take us on to the players that we're going to suggest to improve them positions.
I think we mentioned before, but the main one there is Bentancur as the number 6 being replaced. Right wing, again, with Johnson, he scored goals. He proves he can do that. But other than that, I think he doesn't bring much more. He doesn't create much. So maybe a new right winger, even if it's just for competition, just so that he's got that. I need to improve and step my game up here. I need to potentially become better.
Yeah.
And then if Richarlison, I can't see Richarlison being, he's a good backup, but again, I'd probably sign another striker just to give a bit of competition to Solanke as well, because at the minute, Richarlison's being chucked on just to bring, he's good in the air, physicality, winds players up. But I think we could definitely improve in that space there.
And then obviously there's been quite a lot of rumours about Romero. So if Romero was sold, would you be happy with Danzo being there, or would you expect us to go and sign someone?
I think we'd sign someone anyway, whether it be for Danzo to then be the main starter and then someone to be his backup or vice versa. I don't know, but I think if Romero goes, obviously we'd have to go and sign a centre back. There's no ifs or buts. And yeah, I agree with that comment there as well. Backup for the left back. That's one thing. I think Reguilon's obviously wasn't going to get a look in. Ben Davis ain't really a left back no more. So a backup left back to give Udogie some competition.
Yeah, I actually think with the fullbacks, I think Kyle Walker-Peters is coming in. We've got such a big issue. We haven't gone into it, but the club trained issue that we have in Europe, we essentially have Austin and nobody else. So Kyle Walker-Peters will come in. I think he's happy to sit on the bench, and then we'll have Kyle Walker-Peters, Spence, Udogie and Porro. So I think that will half solve that. It's not insane quality, but we need to, because of regulations, we need to be also looking at them as well. So and then obviously Alex, are you in agreement with Chris and then obviously other people in the chat about it kind of being in them positions?
Yeah, I mean, for the fun purposes, I'll go heavy with transfers, but generally, like, if assuming you kept Romero, I feel like the only position you really need to reinforce, like in midfield, which is a backup for Maddison, potentially a right winger, but I think if you have Kulusevski back, like, in decent condition by December, it's not the end of the world. Because you also have Odebear, and then and Bentancur replacement. I honestly feel like the rest is okay, but for fun purposes, we can go heavier on transfers.
I think that's what a lot of Spurs fans are currently thinking about, is that there's a quite basically if we woke up and it was like, oh, we sold this player, there's not really that attachment to anyone. Like, you can upgrade players in every position if you get reasonable money. So you sell Romero for 70 odd million. He's not available all the time, so you could potentially easily go out and get someone that's may not be at his level but around his level but available every week. Then that brings with its own valuation. So I think that's probably part of it. Like, you look at a lot of these players, and actually if you was picking your 11s, you could probably upgrade every position here, but there needs to be, well, what's the priority? Is the priority X? Is it Y? Whatever. So obviously, in terms of they're the positions, so we're saying CM is obviously the main sort of one. So Chris, if you almost had like 3 targets, if there was like 3 players that you can go and get, and obviously we'll be try to be as realistic as possible here. I think the rough number that's kind of been banded around in terms of transfer kitty, if you like, is between 50 and 100 million for Spurs. And then you've also got potentially selling players like Son. You've got potentially Solomon, Valise, Brian Hill. So let's say you're probably getting around about a 200 million pound kitty to spend. What sort of who would you be looking at? Have you got specific players in mind where you go, yeah, I'd like to go and get them? There's obviously been loads of transfer rumours banded around recently. Who would be your sort of players where you go, yeah, do you know what? That's a player we need.
I think someone said it in the chat. There's Palhinha for DM would be a good start. Again, it's not going to be a solution for 3 or 4 years, but even if it's for 1-2 years, we get him in. Bring the experience, the leadership qualities, and he is just a guy that wants to run around and win the ball and then go here, everyone else go and play with it, basically. I think Mbeumo coming in right side would be a good transfer. Again, obviously work with Frank, it would be a good way to get him in as well. Other than that,
you got one more. So Mbeumo is probably going to set you back, let's say 70 million. Palhinha, let's just say 40. So you'd have like you'd be able to go out and get another good player. You've got like 70 odd million, 80 odd million. Is there anyone else where you think?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest. No names really that I would be desperate to get in.
So you got that team. You got obviously you'll have Sarr there. Would you play Sarr and Bentancur? Sorry, you've got Palhinha there. Would you play Sarr or Bentancur, or would it be Sarr? Who would you play in midfield with it?
I'd probably rather see Bergvall play more games than Sarr personally.
Yeah,
because I feel
like
Palhinha
there, he brings that.
He gets that freedom, yeah. But I think also it's the link up as well. He'll have that link going forward. He'll be able to be the extra body to go forward.
Has Daniel Levy called you up or something? Are you trying to save him 90 million? He's going to be absolutely buzzing with you. Maybe he got you as manager. He's like, I don't need anyone else. I'm gonna win the league with this one. I don't need to spend anything else.
I'd probably find a way to spend it, but top of my head now, I can't think of a third one that I'd sign, to be fair. It'd probably be just, I mean, you bring in Kyle Walker-Peters, he's a free transfer, isn't he, as well?
Yeah, that's the.
So
I've said top target. If he comes in as a top target, we're really struggling.
Yeah.
All right, so you're going in Mbeumo and Palhinha, which is, I think both of them would definitely play a role. And then Alex, so what top targets would you have? You got 200 million, let's say roughly, or have you already spent more than that?
I reckon I could get 4 for under that, to be honest. So if we're going goalkeeper just for fun, I'd go Lucas Chevalier of Lille, who'd probably cost about 40 mil. I think he's like a potential baby Edison. Like, he's pretty good with his distribution. It just looks worse because he plays a lot of long balls that are fairly accurate, but Lille don't have anyone to win headers. Also a pretty good shot stopper, saved 16 goals more than expected over the last 3 seasons, I think. So really up there in Europe, and he's 23 years old.
Has he been heavily linked with someone recently?
He's been linked with City, so get in there and steal.
There you go.
I mean, they've not sold Edison yet, so yeah, there you go. Midfield, I like the João Palhinha shout, but the reason he hasn't played at Bayern for me is because he's just not good enough on the ball, and I don't think you want that sort of player at Tottenham. So I raise you. I appreciate the underutilized defensive midfielder proven in the Premier League. I raise João Palhinha to Boubacar Kamara of Aston Villa, who need to sell for PSR 100%. Reasons. They have Amadou Onana already there, who plays in his position. If they're trying to sell, I feel like they'd sell Kamara for like a decent 30 mil fee just to get that money in to make PSR regulation. 10, I've got a rogue option, another Ligue 1 boy. It's Hakon Haraldsson of Lille. Contributed 8 goals and assists last season, about 18 or so games. I think he's like 22 years old. I think he's on the brink of being a really good player. he's like a very good passer. So I think that he'd be a nice backup to Maddison, basically dropping in and playing passes from deep. Really nice dribbler as well, and good at making runs beyond the striker, which I think is quite a nice role for Thomas Frank. And then my right winger, I had him here. Oh yeah, my right winger is quite bold, which I'm not sure Spurs fans will like for the team he plays for. Do you want to guess?
For the team he plays for?
Yeah,
that'd be Arsenal.
No, it's like, oh, you guys are not Spurs fans. It's the team you don't hate him more, but Mohamed Kudus of West Ham. You'd have to do well to convince West Ham, but it doesn't look like anyone else is going to go in for Kudus.
Yeah,
I feel like West Ham do need to sell as well. If I remember looking at their PSR in order to spend, because they spent really heavily last summer. I feel like Kudus does a lot of the stuff Frank would want, like very direct, like physical winger who can play on both sides. I just feel like he'd be a nice fit, so I thought I'd throw him in there.
There's a lot of West Ham fans that are not sure on Kudus. Now, again, this could be down to the structure of the team not being right, and therefore he's a sort of player that's going to commit players, potentially lose the ball, and if your team's not set up correctly, then it could look poor. But he has been mentioned by quite a few Spurs fans recently. I think we're definitely going down the whole winger route. Again, I'm not sure whether you follow like the kind of rumours that are constantly banding around, because you probably won't be able to do any analysation when you turn listening to everything. But in terms of what's been linked, you've got Grealish, you've got Mbeumo, you've got Semenyo, you've got who else has been linked recently? There's a couple more, and he's been one that over the last probably day or so has kind of really come up, and a lot of Spurs fans are saying that they would like Kudus. I think that would be a stretch personally. I think it's 85 million it was previously quoted, but that was for a Saudi club, so you probably have to add on a little bit more for considering they're going Saudi. But that would definitely revolutionise the team, 100%. If you could bring 4 players in for 50 odd million pound marks. One player that you talk about, Boubacar Kamara, 100%. I really, really like him. I think he would be a very, very good player. And the fact that they missed out on Champions League, I always thought that he was a pipe dream because they were so far ahead of us. But maybe you're right now, because they've missed out. That is definitely an option. I would take him so quickly. And also, what's when you talk about PSR, they signed him for nothing, so he will be pure profit. There will be nothing to make up. It will be 100% profit on him. So I think he would definitely be on the market, and potentially could be one of them where one player's sold and then there's a little bit of a domino effect and he comes into it. Got a couple of players that have been mentioned in the stream as well. So we'll move on now to the sort of transfer targets from the Spurs fan base, if you like, or the magical world of X, and what they've thrown up. So we've got someone that's mentioned today, I believe he plays for Lille. No, he doesn't play for Lille. He plays in the Ligue 1. Rennes, that's it. It was Belieber I was looking at when he played for Lille. There was a comparison between him and Basuma, and they was basically saying Brighton sold Basuma, bought Basuma but better, and they went to the same club to buy him. But have you seen anything of the gentleman here? And I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but what are your feelings about him, Alex?
Oh no, Callum Wendo. Yeah. So he got 17 goals in the league last season, but 5 were penalties, so a bit inflated. He's Rennes. Just a bit of background in this. So they started the season with a manager called Julian Stefan. Were falling towards the bottom of the table, like 14th, 15th. They hired Jordan Pauli, who's the fiery bald guy you've seen in charge of genuinely about 25 clubs in his career. And he's the guy who famously led Argentina, quotes led at the Argentina at the 2018 World Cup. He takes over at Rennes. He lasts about 2 months. He leaves them near the bottom, I think genuinely bottom of the table. So they were, serious chance of relegation. Then Habib Bey comes in, a former TV presenter. He turns Rennes around and finishes a decent season. So to get 12 non-penalty goals in that chaotic mess is pretty good. And I was pretty impressed with him the second half of the season. Not keen on a Spurs thing, though. I just think he'd play in the same position Matisse Tell would play. He's like a tricky, direct, striker-ish player. Probably not strong enough to play as a lone 9 in the Premier League. So don't really see the fit to Tottenham. Fair
enough. I'm going to cancel him off the YouTube list to watch 10,000 videos of him being the best player in the world. Absolutely convinced that he's unbelievable. And then when he comes to Spurs, that's not absolutely the case at all. Callum's come in. again, the names are just. I'm just going to leave them on the screen and let them go and have a look. I personally haven't seen much. I think I've heard good things, but from Sevilla, CM.
I've heard good things as well, but I've Lucien Guim. I know he's playing under 21s, I think, the other day, but I need to catch up on him. So I haven't got a strong opinion on him.
I'm sure you've got an opinion on this fella, and this is the one that I would go for if I could. Mbeumo is obviously plays on the other side, but I think Eze is one of the most Tottenham players that I've never seen play for Tottenham.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I really like Eze. I think he's been overly criticised at Palace in the last season, actually. The only thing is, like, he does kind of play in a role which I'm not sure exists in this Tottenham team unless you're using him as the backup to Maddison, because he's definitely not got the pace to play as a winger. He's much more of like an inside 10. I think that left 10 spot is perfect for him. And also the other thing is, like, I was actually thinking of suggesting him for this, but I don't think he leaves Crystal Palace now they've got the Europa League. So yeah, I really like him as well, but I personally see him playing as like a left-sided midfielder in a 4-3-3. I'm not sure now you've already got Maddison, he'd sign for Tottenham.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's completely fair. The other one has obviously been, as I said, we've got Mbeumo, which I personally think that he is off to United. But the other one that's kind of been linked quite recently is Semenyo. And then Garnacho obviously came out of the blue yesterday a little bit as well. And the rumour is that Garnacho is one that wants to stay in the Premier League and obviously does want to leave United. Do you think that either of them would be a good sort of Frank player? Bearing in mind that, mainly speaking here for Garnacho, Frank has said that he doesn't want to have any players that are a little bit of a problem, shall we say. And Garnacho has definitely come across like that on occasions.
So Garnacho, I would say from the off, I don't think he makes sense for Tottenham. Same reason as that Eze, like, he'd be playing in a role I think he's already covered quite well. I will say, I do think I covered Garnacho recently for a video. I pitched him to Aston Villa after floating him in Arsenal. I watched him at under Ten Hag across 2 seasons under Amorim. Massively underrated. He's so good. And Man United fans act like he's rubbish. And the attitude thing, I'm willing to write off as the fact he's A, 20 years old, B, and B, has been in a horrendously toxic environment at Man United. So just saying that out there. Semenyo, I think, makes a lot of sense for Frank. The only question is that he's played very well under Antonio Roland at Bournemouth, and Bournemouth are a very direct side. They're constantly in transition, right? What happens when Semenyo is faced with low blocks? I need to watch him more closely to like see what he's like as a dribbler against like a settled defense.
Yeah,
but that is a thing you have to remember. Like, he's got good numbers, but he's almost consistently playing in transition, which is not what you'd probably have at Spurs.
Yeah, the major link to a top player really that I've seen that would really be quite interesting. The other one was Xavi Simons.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's interesting because I do think Leipzig would let him go this summer.
Yeah, they didn't. Did they not get Champions League this year? They didn't get European football.
Yeah,
I don't think they got European football at all. So you would expect that they would be willing. I think they've said around the £60 million, 50 to 60 million. I can't remember if that's euro or pounds. That could be an interesting one.
He'd be an upgrade on Maddison, I'd say. As good as Maddison is, I absolutely love Xavi Simons. He's like an elite creative force.
Yeah, I'd love him as Spurs.
Yeah, you play him as a number 10 or as a left-sided player. So yeah, that'd get my cosign.
Right, and then we're just going to fire through because I know Alex has obviously spent loads of time with us already, and it's time to wrap it up. But so we'll just do some fiery players. Actually, John in the chat said that he would like Bassi to come in. From Fulham. What are your thoughts on Bassi potentially being? It would obviously be a backup to Van der Ven.
No, I don't think he's good enough on the ball. When top teams play Fulham, they tend to press Bassi because they know he's their weakest player and he's the weak link. So I'd say no. Chris?
Yeah, same. No for me.
João Gomez at Fulham.
Fulham? Wolves?
Wolves. Fulham on the brain.
Yeah, I was thinking, oh my God, who's that? I mean, yeah, that's bad. I need to watch him and Andre more closely because they both do almost the exact same things. It feels like when I watch them, there's like two really press-resistant, dribbly guys, also good at defending. So the answer would be yes, but also I need to watch closely because I mix him up with Andre all the time.
he did impress me when I watched him. We've got a friend who constantly goes on about him, and I was like, yeah, he's decent, he's good, but. And then when I watched him play against us, although we are all over the place, I was like, no, do you know what? He might be a player that could step up. Pedro Gonzalez, Sporting Lisbon.
Oh, that's a fun shout.
Is he a winger?
He can kind of play in probably all three of the positions behind the striker.
Right.
Yeah.
And he would kind of cover us because we want to kind of. It seems like for us, we're getting a versatile winger or forward. I think he could end up being a really good player if we was to get him.
I think it's been a while since watching him. I do remember liking him at Sporting, but I think Tottenham can. They don't have to take the risk of shopping in the Portuguese league. Like now you're in the Champions League, you can shop in a more established league where you're more likely to see talent translate. Let Man United go and buy Pedro Gonçalves.
And then I've got two others. One of them is Hato. I really like the Eredivisie. There's a lot of Eredivisie players, but I really like Hato. I think he could be a player that can cover centre back, he could cover left back, he could play in a 3, he could potentially play in a 5, he could play 4 in a 4. So Hato, what is your thoughts on him? Obviously very young.
Yeah, very young. He's a good prospect. The thing I'll say is he's very one-footed, which limits what you can do with him. As a fullback, it's not the end of the world, but he's also kind of trapped in a position where he's not. I don't think he's quick enough to play as like an out-and-out fullback. He's also not strong enough to play as a centre back at the moment. Yeah. So maybe as he gets older, that'll change. But yeah, the one-footedness is like he's tried to invert for Ajax a lot of the season, and then he's got pushed out wide because it's like there'll be a good passing option he can make on his right, and he just doesn't make it. He'll turn back and go on his left. So it's a bit of an issue.
And then this one is very left field, and it's definitely me that's kind of going on them. But I've got Sander Berg.
Oh, no, I like that. I really like. I was going to suggest him.
And I also Larson at Wolves, the striker.
Oh, yeah.
I really like. Listen, this isn't going to move the needle. He's not going to turn you in. But for me, as a backup, in terms of we've got Richie who's not available, I think Larson is definitely a good option for Spurs. I don't think he's going to break.
He's a unit as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, suits Frank. I like both of those shouts. I think Sander Berg had a really nice career recovery and had a really nice quiet season last year. So both of those I'm behind.
And then the last ones, because I was going to mention Bakayoko. Raja's put in Rovella, Bakayoko, on Miguel Gutierrez. Bakayoko's price seems to have dropped massively, if I'm right. I think it was rumour today is less than 20 million, but he hasn't played as much for PSV, has he?
Yeah, he had a quiet season. He was my sensible transfer pick for Tottenham last year, last summer when I did a video.
I think I remember that one as it goes.
Yeah, I still really like him. Although it's been a little while since I tuned in, so I'd be looking at a close look. Rovella, if I remember correctly, he's gone to Lazio and has a very high release clause, which is an issue, which does put things off. Miguel Gutierrez, I'm a bit worried because I think he's still at Girona, right? And Girona had a very poor year last year, and he's another player whose stock's just like completely collapsed. So yeah, might have be a bit nervous on him.
Right, and then the only other question to ask is to both of you again, starting with Chris. Before we wrap up, guys, is how will Frank and Spurs get on this season? Chris, I know it's early. I know we haven't even revolutionised our team by signing all of Alex's suggestions, but what do you think happens this year?
I'm going to go realistic. I think we get top 8. Even if we finish 7th or 8th, I think people will see it as sort of a bad season, but I think that would probably be good for us. I'd probably take 8. I wouldn't be delighted with it, obviously, but depending on performances, players we get in, and tactical changes and everything else, I think top 8's realistic. I think we probably get to a semi-final of a FA Cup, League Cup, whatever it may be, and I'd like to see us get out of the group stage, the new group stage of the Champions League, and have a go at progressing there. I think we might, again, it all depends on how we play and how we set up and the players we bring in, but I think we might end up getting knocked out by one of the big guns and one of the knockout stages afterwards. I think it would be too much for us. But I think there's a lot to look forward to. I'm excited about the season coming up. As I say, it can't get any worse. Last year was just horrendous, and
can't get any worse. The European champions, it can't get any worse.
I know, and it's mental saying that. So now I'm looking forward to actually enjoying watching Spurs play again, hopefully.
And then moving on, Alex, what are your expectations for Spurs?
I think I'd echo 7th or 8th finish. I think that is realistic.
Yeah.
I think I'd be a bit more positive just in the general outlook. I'd like to think Spurs fans end the campaign going, this has been a fine season. There's been signs of progress. I'm less bold on the cups. I think that's the fan speaking in you, Chris, of saying, yeah, we'll reach the semi-final. Of course we will. Every fan says this. But yeah, I think you'll be respectable in knockout competitions. It's a hard season to predict. I do think you'll come out of it fairly positive, and Frank gets a second season.
Yeah. I think he needs to get some sort of back in, and if he doesn't get back in, he deserves even longer, because he's going to have to. He's incorporated a team where we've already. I mean, you've picked 4 players in an 11 already that can make instant upgrades, and they're only £50 million players. We're not talking about bringing in 70, 80 million pound players in all these positions. These are like decent sums, and we're replacing like 4 players. And I'm sure you probably had a list of 100 more players you're going to put in there. So, right, guys, I just want to say a huge thank you to obviously both the guests for coming on. Alex, massive thank you. All the links have been in the chat. All the links will be in the description boxes as well. We didn't mention that the Super Cup. Great shout, Raja.
You lose. You lose.
Oh, come on, we were supposed to end it being optimistic. We was gonna take them to the cleaners after them winning the Champions League 5-0. So right, we'll scrub that. Forget about that. We'll lose. There is no Super Cup. Don't worry about it. We won't get trophies in consecutive seasons. Alex has just absolutely killed us. But we'll keep signing these players, and then we'll win the league in a few years. So massive thank you to everyone in the chat. Massive thank you for the guests for coming on. I really appreciate it. I hope you like that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I could have Alex on every week talking about transfers that we're never ever going to make because we're Tottenham Hotspur. But thank you very much. Have a great evening, and as always, come on, you Spurs.